This movie featured a malfunctioning sex robot and was literally banned in multiple countries. And it's not even close to the craziest film on this list. Hollywood tried to bury these 10 sci-fi movies in the 90s, and after you see what's in them, you'll know exactly why. In 1990, some filmmakers scraped together $1 million to make a cyberpunk movie about a bodyguard smuggling narcotic computer chips across a post-apocalyptic wasteland. She had a sex android helping her, and they were being chased by a guy who called himself Plughead because he'd installed electrical outlets in his skull. Total Recall came out the same year, with Schwarzenegger and $65 million behind it. Guess which one people went to see? Circuitry Man played in a handful of theaters and then disappeared. But 5 years later, Johnny Mnemonic came out with Keanu Reeves, and some people started noticing something. That big-budget cyberpunk film was using ideas that had already shown up in the tiny movie nobody watched. Data smuggling, the dystopian visual style, even specific aesthetic choices. Circuitry Man had covered that ground half a decade earlier on basically no money. Nobody does body horror like Japan, and this one's proof. A sex-slave cyborg that can't maintain an erection gets his memory wiped and thrown out by his owners. Another homeless android finds him, takes care of him, and tries to bring his memory back. Then she has some kind of breakdown and starts torturing him. The film barely had any dialogue. Most of it was just disturbing visuals and sounds. There's graphic sexual content, intense body horror, the whole thing is designed to make you uncomfortable. It got blocked from normal release almost everywhere. The UK couldn't legally distribute it. Japan kept it in underground screenings and festivals instead of regular theaters. Other countries just banned it altogether. So Pinocchio ended up living in this shadow zone where you couldn't just go see it or legally buy it. Dylan McDermott starred in a low-budget British sci-fi film about a killer robot. Somebody found it in an irradiated wasteland and gave to his girlfriend as a present. She mounted the robot's head as a sculpture in her apartment, and then it came back to life and started murdering people. The film was based on a comic story and had this bleak Mad Max aesthetic with scrap metal and wastelands everywhere. Nobody expected it to make any money, then it opened at number 6 at the US box office. Back in Britain, where the film was actually made, censors cut the hell out of it. Too much violence and gore. Death scenes got trimmed or removed. The version British audiences could buy on tape was way tamer than what Americans were watching. Hardware became a surprise hit in the United States while getting shredded in its home country. Took years before the UK released an uncut version. Albert Pyun was this B-movie director who made cheap action and sci-fi films. I'm talking Cyborg, or the 90s Captain America that nobody remembers. Mostly stuff that went straight to video and had budgets smaller than most TV episodes. Not exactly a resume that inspires confidence. In 1992, he made Nemesis on another tight budget. It's a cyberpunk story about a bounty hunter named Alex who's been patched up with cybernetic implants after getting injured. He ends up infiltrating a group of revolutionaries who are trying to stop androids from replacing human leaders. Standard sci-fi setup sounds like a dozen other movies from that era. Except somehow it actually worked. The special effects were way better than anyone expected for that kind of money. The story had these interesting ideas about technology and humanity. And there's this twist where Alex discovers something horrible about himself that I won't spoil, but it's genuinely effective. The movie was successful enough to spawn 2 sequels, which for a direct-to-video B-movie in the 90s was actually impressive. This was during that period when everyone was obsessed with what technology would do to humanity's future, and Nemesis managed to tap into that even with no budget. Same year, completely different kind of dystopian nightmare. Fortress is set in 2017, and there's a strict one-child policy. A couple had their first child die, got pregnant with a second one, and that's illegal now. Both of them get sent to prison for it. But it's not just any prison. It's an underground facility where the husband gets his memory erased and the wife is kept until she gives birth. And here's the really dark part. The baby is now owned by a giant corporation that's going to turn it into a cyborg. The prison itself is genuinely nightmarish, a place where murderers are locked up next to people whose only crime was having a second kid. The cast is engaging enough to sell this premise. It's not trying to be a space odyssey or Blade Runner, it knows exactly what it is. A fun, dark sci-fi thriller with a nasty premise and solid execution. But again, it's basically been buried. Not ambitious enough for critics to remember. 1992 was apparently the year for forgotten sci-fi movies. This one's got Bruce Campbell in it, which automatically makes it worth talking about. Mindwarp was produced by Fangoria Films, which, if you don't know, was the horror magazine trying to get into the movie business. They didn't last long. The company made a handful of films and then shut down. But while they existed, they put out this post-apocalypse movie with Campbell. The setup is that survivors live in a sealed biodome and escape their boring existence through virtual reality. Our main character, Judy, gets tired of that limited life and starts messing with other people's dream states. For that crime, she gets exiled to the toxic wasteland outside the dome. That's where she meets Stover, played by Campbell, who's one of the last normal people left on Earth outside the biodome. And then there's this ambiguous ending where you're not sure if it's real or if it's all still virtual reality. The movie's playing with that idea throughout. What's real, what's the dream state, but it doesn't beat you over the head with it. David Twohy made Pitch Black and Chronicles of Riddick, but way before any of that, in 1993, he made his first film with basically no money, which meant no budget for special effects and no big stars. Just an idea about time travel that he had to pull off through pure concept. The film follows Jeff Daniels after his wife dies. He moves back to his hometown, rents out his guest house to some tourists who act completely wrong. Turns out they're from the future, and they visit major disasters right before they happen. One of them warns Daniels to leave town. Next day, meteor hits, kills everyone except him. The tourists abduct him, but he gets his hands on one of their time devices and jumps back a day. Now he's got 24 hours to save his daughter and everyone else before the meteor hits again. What makes this work is Twohy found a way to make time travel feel genuinely creepy without any visual effects budget. The entire horror comes from the tourists themselves, these people calmly watching a town full of people who are about to die. That's the image that sticks with you. A scientist abducts children. Not for experiments in the traditional sense, he wants their dreams. He's built some bioengineered servants to kidnap kids off the street. When they take a circus strongman's little brother, he goes looking for him with an orphan thief he meets. They track everything to an offshore rig where the scientist lives with his creations, and the dream-stealing tech has corrupted everyone's memories and sense of reality. But explaining the plot doesn't capture what this film actually is. It had a real budget and they used every dollar to create this grotesque steampunk nightmare world. The visuals are overwhelming. It's somewhere between sci-fi and fantasy and fever dream, and the whole thing leaves this dark impression that won't fade. Hollywood took one look at it and had no idea what to do. It was too weird and too European, too uncommercial for American audiences. It showed up in a handful of art house theaters and vanished. Takashi Miike made this in the mid-90s before he became known internationally. If you've seen any of his later work, you already know what to expect. He doesn't hold back on the violence. Some pathetic Yakuza wannabe gets killed during a gang war. A scientist resurrects him as a cyborg, and now he's basically indestructible. He goes after everyone who wronged him. It's basically a violent version of RoboCop, except with a fraction of the budget and absolutely no restraint. The movie looks cheap because it was cheap, but the filmmakers didn't care about that. They just went as extreme as they wanted with the violence and dark humor. American distributors wouldn't touch it. Too violent for the mid-90s market here. It stayed locked to Japan and showed up occasionally on imported tapes. This should have been huge. Philip K. Dick wrote the original story. Peter Weller from RoboCop signed on to star. Dan O'Bannon, the guy who wrote Alien, did the screenplay. $20 million budget for a proper sci-fi film. All the pieces were there. It's set on a distant planet. Two mining corporations destroyed it fighting a civil war. One side developed autonomous killing machines called screamers that hunt enemy soldiers. Except the machines evolved themselves. Now they can pass as human, and the handful of survivors left on this dead planet can't tell who's real anymore. It's paranoid, atmospheric sci-fi. It uses the Dick story well and builds genuine tension as the body count rises and trust falls apart. And it completely bombed, just died at the box office. The marketing failed, the release timing was off, something went sideways. It disappeared from theaters fast and Hollywood wrote it off as a $20 million loss.